The air was thick with an eerie silence as I clocked in for another night shift at the old, decrepit hospital. Built in the early 1900s, it had seen countless patients come and go, many never leaving its sterile, whitewashed walls. Tonight, though, felt different. There was an unsettling chill that gnawed at my bones and sent shivers up my spine. I worked as a security guard, patrolling the empty corridors from dusk till dawn. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills. As I clipped my flashlight to my belt and adjusted my cap, I glanced at the flickering lights overhead. They had been doing that a lot recently, and the maintenance crew couldn't seem to fix the problem. The hospital was a labyrinth of narrow hallways and hidden passageways, and it was easy to get lost if you didn't know your way around. The night shift was usually quiet, the occasional beep from a machine or distant murmur of the few remaining staff members the only sounds to break the silence. Tonight, however, the silence was oppressive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I started my rounds on the first floor, my footsteps echoing off the tiled floors. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. As I walked past the empty patient rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than usual. Halfway through my patrol, I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. It was coming from one of the rooms down the hall. I paused, straining to hear. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. I took a deep breath and approached the room, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The door was ajar, and I pushed it open slowly. The room was empty, but the whispering continued, seemingly coming from nowhere. I swept my flashlight across the room, searching for the source. My beam landed on a small, dusty radio sitting on the windowsill. The whispering was coming from the radio, though it wasn't plugged in. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the radio. The whispering grew louder, more frantic. I reached out and touched the radio, and the whispering stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. This wasn't the first strange occurrence I'd experienced during my time at the hospital, but it was certainly one of the most unnerving. I left the room and continued my patrol, my nerves on edge. As I made my way to the second floor, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. I quickened my pace, eager to finish my rounds and return to the security office. The second floor was even darker than the first, the flickering lights casting ominous shadows. I walked past the abandoned operating rooms, their cold, steel tables gleaming in the dim light. I had always found this floor to be the creepiest, and tonight was no exception. As I rounded a corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure was standing at the end of the hallway, partially obscured by the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I froze, my flashlight being trained on the figure. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, staring at me with those haunting eyes. I took a step back, my hand reaching for the radio at my belt. Before I could call for help, the figure vanished, leaving nothing but an icy chill in its wake. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? No, it had been too real. I forced myself to move, my legs feeling like lead. I needed to finish my rounds and get back to the safety of the security office. The rest of my patrol was uneventful, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When I finally returned to the security office, I locked the door behind me and collapsed into my chair. I checked the monitors, but everything seemed normal. The figure was nowhere to be seen. I tried to shake off the encounter and focus on my duties, but the image of those glowing eyes haunted me. As the night dragged on, I found myself dozing off, the exhaustion of the day catching up with me. I jolted awake to the sound of static on the radio. "Help me," a voice whispered through the static. It was faint, barely audible, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. I grabbed the radio, my hands shaking. "Who is this?" I demanded, but there was no response, just more static. I set the radio down, my mind racing. What was going on? Suddenly, the lights in the security office flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my heart pounding. The room was eerily silent, the only sound my ragged breathing. I heard a soft creak behind me, like someone stepping on a loose floorboard. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, but I could feel a presence, something malevolent and unseen. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. There was no response, just the oppressive silence. I backed up against the desk, my flashlight sweeping the room. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. A cold, clammy hand touched my shoulder, and I screamed, spinning around. There was no one there, but the touch lingered, a chilling reminder that I was not alone. The static on the radio crackled to life again, and the whispering returned, more urgent this time. "Help me," the voice pleaded. I didn't know what to do. My instincts told me to run, to get out of the hospital as fast as I could, but something held me back. I couldn't leave, not without finding out what was happening. I gathered my courage and left the security office, my flashlight beam flickering as I made my way back to the second floor. The hallway was just as I had left it, empty and silent. I approached the spot where I had seen the figure, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the end of the hallway, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. It was partially hidden behind a curtain, and it looked old, but wood warped and cracked. I pushed the door open, and a rush of cold air greeted me. The room beyond was dark and musty, filled with old medical equipment and dusty files. I stepped inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The whispering was louder now, coming from somewhere in the room. I followed the sound to a small, locked cabinet in the corner. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. With a deep breath, I forced it open. Inside, I found a stack of old patient files, their pages yellowed with age. At the bottom of the stack was a small, leather-bound diary. I opened the diary, and my heart skipped a beat. The pages were filled with entries from a former patient, detailing strange occurrences and sightings in the hospital. The last entry was particularly chilling. "They are here. They won't let me leave. Help me." As I read the words, the whispering grew louder, more desperate. I could feel a presence in the room, watching me. I turned around slowly, my flashlight beam sweeping the room. There, in the corner, was the figure. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and it reached out a bony hand towards me. I stumbled back, my heart racing. "Help me," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure stepped closer, its hand inches from my face. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. The room was silent once more, the oppressive presence gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to catch my breath. I don't remember how I made it out of that room, out of the hospital. All I know is that I ran, faster than I ever had before. I quit my job the next day, unable to face another night in that haunted place. Years have passed since that night, but the memories still haunt me. The hospital has long since been abandoned, left to decay and crumble. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the whispering, calling out for help from beyond the grave.